Devastated and drunk after her divorce, she wakes up in a millionaire's bed. What happens next will leave you speechless. Hello, my wonderful family, and welcome back to the place where every story breathes life. I'm your narrator, James, and before we dive into today's tale, I just want to say from the depths of my heart how much you mean to me. You're the soul of this channel, and I'm beyond grateful for the warmth and strength of this beautiful community we've built. I send you my deepest love and prayers, wishing you peace, joy, and boundless love in everything you do. Your loyalty humbles me every day, and it's your light that makes storytelling so special. As we step into today's emotional journey, thank you for being here. Your presence is the heartbeat of this space. This story is about how a single night can flip destiny on its head, and trust me, it will leave you with hope and wonder. So stay until the end. It's a path worth walking, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Now let's begin. Rita had always turned heads, her elegance unmistakable, especially with her long, beautifully braided hair, cascading like silk around her shoulders. More than beauty, she was a woman of heart, a devoted wife who saw marriage as sacred and lasting. Her love for her husband, Rayan, ran deep, and she would have crossed oceans just to make him smile. But that love turned into chains, invisible but tightening every day, as Rayan grew colder, more distant, and eventually dismissive. Gone was the man who once adored her. In his place was a stranger who seemed emotionally vacant. She tried everything to revive their love. Thoughtful gestures, open conversations, quiet prayers, but it all fell flat. The more she reached for him, the more he recoiled, and the connection that once lit her soul turned into silence. Slowly, what once was a marriage built on love faded into a one-sided war with no end. And then came the day that broke her. With eyes that no longer held any warmth, Rayan handed her the divorce papers. No reason, no apology, just cold detachment. That moment splintered her soul. Her world collapsed in silence, her heart cracking like porcelain dropped from a height. She never thought he'd be the one to walk away. Not like this, not without trying. She stood alone in the wreckage of what once was, blindsided by abandonment, holding on to memories that now felt like cruel reminders of a life that no longer existed. The home they shared turned hollow, the echo of laughter now a ghostly memory that taunted her. Days blurred into nights, each one heavier than the last. Even the sunlight lost its color. Her world had dimmed, and so had her hope. She wore a smile for the world, but inside she was unraveling. Rita couldn't escape the endless loop of memories. Rayan holding her hand, whispering promises, looking at her like she was his whole world. Now those moments felt stolen, distant, like they belonged to another woman. The heartbreak robbed her of her sense of control. She felt unmoored, as though she was drifting without an anchor, caught in a tide of sorrow too vast to comprehend. Her emotions churned, raw and messy, with no outlet. And on one particularly unbearable night, the sadness rose like a tide she could no longer keep at bay. She tried to stay strong, tried to keep her composure, but something inside her gave way. The heartbreak had festered for weeks, but that night it felt like it had come alive, clawing at her chest, demanding to be heard. She poured herself a glass of wine, and then another, and another. The wine dulled the edges, but it didn't cure the ache. Rita had never been reckless. She was always composed, even in chaos. But that night, all sense of order dissolved. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or just scream into the wind. With trembling fingers, she kept drinking, searching for peace at the bottom of a glass. The room spun, time blurred, her pain numbed, but didn't leave. Somewhere between the haze of alcohol and anguish, she stumbled out into the night, barefoot, breathless, and broken. The cold air slapped her face, but it didn't sober her up. She was walking, but not with purpose, more like floating through a reality that no longer felt like hers. Rain began to fall. She didn't care. Her sobs came without warning, echoing into the silent night. Her feet moved aimlessly, her soul even more lost. She wasn't aware of the danger, didn't care. She just wanted out. Out of the pain, the silence, the nothingness Rayan had left behind. The rain drenched her clothes, mixing with the tears on her face, but she didn't flinch. Her body was on autopilot, her mind blank. She didn't know where she was or where she was going, but somewhere in that storm, fate was waiting for her, and her world was about to shift in a way she couldn't possibly predict. Somewhere between heartbreak and rock bottom, a new path was being carved out. She didn't know that this night, this reckless night of grief, would mark the start of something unexpected, something bigger, something life-altering. Meanwhile, across the city, Daryl Mitchell was on his way home, a man of discipline, control, and iron resolve. CEO of a multinational empire, Daryl was the kind of man people read about in Forbes and admired from a distance. He had the kind of wealth that turned heads, but a solitude that wealth couldn't fix. Years of calculated choices had made him powerful, but emotionally walled off. He had known pain but buried it beneath boardroom deals and headlines. As his sleek car cruised through the rain-soaked streets, something made him slow down. A figure in the distance, soaked, stumbling, fragile. She looked like heartbreak wrapped in skin. Something about her pierced his carefully guarded exterior. Without thinking, Daryl pulled over. Instinct, maybe, or something deeper, something he couldn't name. He stepped out into the rain, his designer suit absorbing the downpour. She didn't notice him at first, lost in her thoughts, broken by the storm inside her. Her steps were erratic, her face a portrait of sorrow. Daryl approached, concern flashing in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She looked up, dazed, mascara streaked with rain, eyes red and glassy. I, I'm fine," she slurred, but it was clear she wasn't, not even close. Daryl's gaze hardened. He didn't know her name, but he could see the danger she was in. She needed help, and he wasn't the type to walk away from someone in pain. He gently held her arm, steadying her. "No, you're not," he said, his tone brooking no argument. She tried to resist. Pride, confusion, alcohol, all at war within her, but her legs buckled. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered, unsure whether to trust him. Daryl didn't answer right away. He guided her to his car, his grip gentle but secure. She barely registered the luxury vehicle or his wealth. She just felt her body giving in, her strength spent. He opened the door, helped her inside, and wrapped her in warmth. Her head rested against the seat, her eyes fluttering closed. Daryl circled to the driver's side, started the engine, and glanced at her. "You're safe now," he said, more to himself than her. The silence stretched as the city lights blurred past them. Rita finally spoke, her voice weak. "Where am I?" Daryl glanced at her. "You're coming with me," he said softly. "You can't be out here like this." She didn't protest. She didn't have the strength. Everything felt dreamlike, like she was suspended between worlds. Yet something about Daryl's voice, his presence, grounded her. She didn't know who he was, didn't know his name, but she felt safe. The kind of safe she hadn't felt in months. The car rolled to a stop in front of a towering mansion bathed in soft golden light. Daryl stepped out, walked to her side, and opened the door. She didn't resist. Her world had already turned upside down, and it was only just beginning. Though it wasn't pity, it was understanding. A depth that told her he knew what it was like to be broken too, even if he didn't speak it aloud. "Because I know what it feels like," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "To be abandoned, to question your worth, to look at the pieces of your life scattered on the floor and not know how to start putting them back together." Rita stared at him, the words hitting her like a wave. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected someone to get it. Not like this. Daryl wasn't trying to rescue her in the way Rayan had pretended to, only to leave her drowning later. No, this was something quieter, more human. He was offering her a hand, not a savior. Just someone to sit beside her in the darkness until she was ready to walk out of it. Her lips parted, but no words came. She didn't know what to say. The storm inside her hadn't passed, but for the first time, she realized she didn't have to weather it alone. She looked down at her hands, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. And then slowly, like testing the weight of a decision, she nodded. "I'll stay," she whispered. "For now." Daryl gave a soft, almost imperceptible smile. That's all I ask. And in that moment, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was the beginning of something. Maybe not healing yet, maybe not even trust, but something real, something that mattered. There was a quiet kind of reassurance in Daryl's presence, one Rita hadn't even known she needed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to trust him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone in years. At first, she had been guarded, uncertain of his intentions, and wary that the comfort he offered might only be fleeting. But Daryl never pushed. He never demanded more than she could give. Instead, he gave her space, space to breathe, to think, to heal on her own terms. Before long, their days began to blend into one another, forming a gentle rhythm that brought an unexpected peace to Rita's heart. They would share quiet meals, stroll the winding garden paths of the mansion, or sit for hours among the lush greenery, talking about everything and nothing. The conversations came effortlessly. They were light, unforced, yet slowly peeled back the layers of who they were beneath the wounds. There was something about Daryl that made Rita feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. With him, she didn't have to perform or pretend. She could speak of the things she had buried deep, the fears she had never voiced, the dreams she had once held close but abandoned, and the ache of a heart still trying to mend. With every shared moment, her burdens seemed a little lighter, her breaths a little deeper. The past still lingered, but it no longer held her captive. Daryl had a way of showing care without speaking a word. He would notice when her gaze grew distant and return moments later with a warm blanket or a cup of tea, his soft smile enough to chase away the chill of memory. He spoke of his business and the world he came from, but never in a way that made her feel excluded. Rather, it felt like he was offering her glimpses of himself, slowly dismantling the walls he'd built over time. And though he never said it aloud, Daryl was becoming more attached than he expected. It hadn't been his plan, but something about Rita's quiet strength, her wounded resilience, drew him in. The bond between them was unspoken yet palpable, like an invisible thread pulling them ever closer. They didn't talk about it. They didn't have to. It was there in the way their hands brushed in passing, in the way his gaze lingered on her a little too long, softened in a way it never had before. Rita felt it too. She found herself gravitating toward him, not just for his kindness, but for the safety his presence offered. Somehow he had become a constant in her life. She didn't know exactly when it happened, but she knew that she could rely on him, trust him, and that scared her more than anything. Her heart, still fragile from Rayan's betrayal, had been closed off for so long, but now with Daryl, it was beginning to open. He made her feel like she mattered, like she was worthy of affection, of love. No longer just the woman shattered by a past she didn't ask for, she began to rediscover the pieces of herself she thought she had lost. And yet, despite all the tenderness, all the closeness, neither of them voiced what was quietly blooming between them. The fear of naming it, of risking it, kept them silent. It was a delicate dance, one of long glances and hesitant touches, of laughter echoing through the halls and silences filled with what wasn't said. Daryl, for all his composed charm, held back. He had been hurt before, had locked his heart behind carefully crafted walls, but Rita, without even trying, was breaking through. Still, he hesitated, afraid of making the wrong move, afraid of losing the one thing he hadn't realized he'd come to treasure. Rita, too, battled her own fears. She wanted to believe in a future again, wanted to trust this man who had given her a place to heal. But her past whispered doubts, reminded her of pain, and urged her to protect herself. And so, each time she came close to acknowledging what she felt, she stepped back again. They remained suspended in that liminal space, neither ready to leap, yet unable to walk away. And so they lingered, two souls drawn irresistibly together, yet still caged by fear. It wasn't a lack of desire that held them back. It was the weight of everything they had endured. And then came that stormy evening. The sky outside roared with thunder, the rain lashing at the windows like the emotions they kept restrained. The mansion, usually so serene, seemed charged with anticipation. Rita stood near the grand window, a vision of quiet power and beauty. The dark, elegant gown she wore clung to her curves, the ambient light bathing her brown skin in a soft golden glow. Her braided hair cascaded down her back like silk, framing a face no longer hidden in pain, but radiant with new strength. Behind her, Daryl entered the room, and for a long moment, he said nothing. He just watched her, a storm of emotions behind his usually unreadable eyes. And though the space between them remained, the air was thick with everything they had not yet dared to speak. Something had to give. Someone who saw her not as a broken woman, but as the beautiful, strong soul she truly was. Rita had never imagined this moment. The emotions swirling inside her were overwhelming. That this man, this powerful, handsome CEO, would look at her with such tenderness and longing. It was unimaginable. And yet, here she was, standing in the center of it. The past few weeks had been a quiet dance of healing, of tentative steps towards something she hadn't dared name. But this moment, this was different. This was clarity wrapped in warmth, a confession that broke past all her fears. The weight of his words settled deep within her soul like a healing balm, soothing wounds that had long ached in silence. It was as though a light had finally found the cracks in her heart and poured through. She had been afraid to love again, afraid to trust, to hope. But Daryl's gentleness, his unshaken patience and unwavering presence, melted those fears like morning sun on frost. He had never rushed her, never expected more than she was ready to give. And now here he was, offering her something she had buried long ago, a future. Her heart swelled and a soft, almost shy smile curved her lips, a smile filled with hope, dreams, and a future she had never dared imagine. Emotion, long buried, bubbled to the surface. Without thinking, she leaned into him, pressing her body against his. The warmth of his embrace calmed the storm inside her. She could feel the rhythm of his heart, its pounding a mirror of her own. The universe in all its complexity had brought them together, and now it was up to them to decide what to do with this love, born in the most unexpected of places. Their lips met, soft at first, tentative, like a question whispered into the dark. Then with growing intensity, as though they'd both been holding back for far too long, the kiss was everything, tender, passionate, full of unspoken promises. It was the culmination of pain, longing, and hope. Rita's hands tangled in Daryl's hair, pulling him closer as though trying to anchor the moment forever. He responded in kind, his hands sliding to the small of her back, drawing her in until there was no space left between them. The world spun, but inside the walls of that room, time stood still. The storm outside became background noise. In this space, there was only them, two souls breaking open to let love in. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and wide-eyed, Daryl's voice was low, husky with emotion. "I love you, Rita. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Her heart stuttered. Her eyes shimmered with tears, the words catching in her throat before she whispered back, "I love you too." And in that moment, as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain painted the windows, a new chapter of their story began. One written in love, healing, and the quiet promise of forever. Their night unfolded like a sacred tapestry, each thread woven from passion, vulnerability, and raw emotion. The storm outside raged, but inside, there was only warmth. It was a night neither of them had expected, but both knew would change them forever. As they lay together afterward, bodies entwined, hearts beating in unison, the world outside faded. Rita had once believed love was pain, that trust led only to heartbreak, but Daryl had shattered that illusion, piece by gentle piece. He hadn't just loved her, he had seen her, seen the strength in her wounds, the beauty in her survival. In his arms, she didn't feel broken, she felt whole. Daryl, too, had found something he never knew he needed. He had conquered boardrooms, led empires, but he had never felt as powerful, as alive, as he did with her. Rita was his anchor, the calm to his chaos, the softness he never thought he deserved. They had both come from pain, from silence, from isolation. But that night was not just physical, it was a merging of souls, a quiet surrender, a promise that healing could come not only through time, but through love. They whispered into the night, hopes, fears, dreams. Neither wanted it to end, but they knew it was only the beginning. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the room like a silent blessing. Daryl stirred first. He turned, and there she was, Rita, peaceful, curled beside him, as though she had always belonged there. Watching her breathe, he felt something shift inside him, something profound. He knew she was the one. All the walls he had built, all the fears he had nursed, they fell away in that moment. She had made him believe again, in love, in peace, in possibility. He leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, and whispered, "I want to marry you, Rita." The words surprised even him in their clarity, but they were true, so deeply true it was as if every path in his life had led to this. Rita's eyes fluttered open. Her expression, drowsy and soft, slowly shifted to surprise, and then something deeper, a trembling smile, a widening of the heart. She had been terrified to trust again, but with Daryl there was no fear, only the certainty of belonging. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, unable to hold back the smile. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, Daryl." And in that room, in the quiet aftermath of a storm, two broken hearts found the courage to believe in forever. He couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing in his chest like a melody he never knew he needed. In that moment, wrapped in the stillness of their shared breath and quiet affection, Daryl had never known such happiness, such peace, and he knew without a shadow of a doubt it was because of Rita. Together they had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that made everything before feel like the prelude to a symphony. As the morning light crept gently into the room, heralding the beginning of their future, they both knew this was only the start of their journey. There would be trials, storms, and shadows, but so long as they faced them together, they felt invincible. For the first time in his life, Daryl felt complete. He vowed then, silently but fiercely, to do whatever it took to ensure Rita always felt the same. She had transformed his world in ways words could never fully explain, and he was determined to never let her go. The love they shared was something rare, something unfiltered and true. And in the hush of that morning, with the warmth of her beside him, Daryl knew they had found something meant to last, something worth every sacrifice. But the moment Daryl proposed to Rita, what had been deeply personal and sacred exploded into the public domain. What should have remained theirs alone became the spark that lit a media wildfire. Daryl Mitchell, business titan, public enigma, billionaire, was no stranger to flashing lights and whispered headlines. But Rita, the woman who had once lived far from the world's gaze, was thrust overnight into an orbit of relentless exposure. The proposal, meant to be a private turning point, had been captured by an opportunistic photographer, and the image, Daryl on one knee, eyes brimming with emotion, Rita's hand in his, was everywhere. The media devoured it. Tycoon Daryl Mitchell proposes to mystery woman, the headlines blared. From heartache to heiress, who is Rita? The photographs were dissected, speculated upon, sold, and spread like wildfire. Overnight, Rita became a household name, an object of fascination and tabloid obsession. The days that followed blurred into a surreal dream for Rita. Everywhere she went, eyes followed, whispers echoed behind her. Strangers knew her face, new fragments of her story twisted into dramatic headlines. The woman who once lived quietly and deeply was now the center of a storm she had never asked to be a part of. Her past, once hers alone, was dragged into the spotlight. Her brief marriage to Rayan was unearthed, her divorce dissected by strangers with agendas. Her pain became public spectacle, her resilience twisted into fairy tale headlines. The Cinderella billionaire's bride, one magazine declared. But Rita wasn't anyone's fairy tale. She had lived through fire, through heartbreak, and had come out not as a princess, but as a survivor. She didn't want to be saved. She had saved herself. Still, the world wanted its narrative, and it didn't care who Rita truly was. Amid the storm, Daryl never faltered. He saw what it was doing to her, the way her shoulders hunched, the way her eyes dulled under the weight of attention she never sought. He hated it, hated the cost of their love being paraded for consumption. So he built walls, layers of protection, fewer public appearances, tighter security, sharper boundaries. But the public's hunger grew. Who was this woman who had stolen the heart of the untouchable Daryl Mitchell? What did she have that others didn't? And what was their life really like behind the guarded gates of his mansion? But through it all, Daryl was steadfast, her shelter, her champion. He whispered reassurance into her silence, held her when the noise became too loud. None of it matter, he told her, again and again. Only this, only us. Still, Rita felt the shift deep in her bones. Her identity, once rooted in privacy and quiet dignity, felt like it had been stolen. She missed the days when she could walk freely, unnoticed. She missed the silence, the anonymity. And though she loved Daryl with all her heart, she couldn't help the grief of losing a piece of herself to the world's curiosity. But love, she realized, was not about retreating. It was about standing firm, together. And with Daryl by her side, with his unwavering devotion, she began to find the courage to face the life she never asked for, but now had to live. No matter the scrutiny, the headlines, the whispers, what they had was real, and that truth was untouchable. Miles away, Rayon sat in his immaculate apartment, sunlight slanting through high windows, untouched coffee cooling in his hands. The TV flickered silently before him, and on the screen, Rita, his ex-wife, his once. Her laughter was captured mid-motion, her smile radiating in a way he hadn't seen in years. Standing beside her, commanding and effortlessly magnetic, was Daryl Mitchell. Rayon felt the breath catch in his throat. There she was, the woman he had discarded, glowing in the arms of a man who worshipped the ground she walked on. And in that instant, the weight of his decisions crushed him like a slow-moving avalanche. How had he been so blind? How had he let her go? Rita had loved him once, unconditionally, fiercely. She had stood by him through silence, indifference, emotional winters. She had offered warmth, patience, loyalty. And he had thrown it all away, dismissed her, broken her, taken her for granted. Now she was living the life he never thought she'd find without him. Loved, protected, celebrated. Daryl was everything he had failed to be. Present, kind, attentive. And the bitter taste of regret filled Rayon's mouth like poison. He had thought himself powerful. He had thought he had time. But he had been a fool. He had mistaken her strength for permanence. He had believed she would always be there, waiting. And now, she was gone. He watched the screen as if through a fog, every image of her like a dagger. He had tried to fill the emptiness with other women, with business deals, with late nights and empty beds. But nothing worked. Nothing dulled the ache. Because it wasn't just Rita he had lost. It was the part of himself that had known love and had destroyed it. She had given him everything. He had returned nothing. And now she belonged to someone who saw her clearly, who cherished her visibly, who honored her love in ways Rayon never knew how. And the worst part? He knew it was too late. As the days passed, the truth became unavoidable. He would never get her back. No matter how deep his regret, no matter how sharp his self-loathing, some choices couldn't be undone. Rita had risen from the ashes he left her in and found a man who treated her like treasure. And Rayon, he was just a name in her rear view, a cautionary tale, a memory, nothing more. This passage beautifully captures the transformation of Rita and Daryl's relationship, showcasing how love and healing can go hand in hand. The depth of their connection is touching, with each moment reflecting their emotional journey together. Their love is built not only on passion, but also on understanding, support, and mutual respect, which creates a rich foundation for their life. Their story feels grounded in authenticity, in the gradual development of their bond, through small, meaningful moments and grand gestures, speaks to a deep emotional resonance. The setting of their luxurious home and their intimate shared moments adds a layer of romanticism, but it's the emotional depth of their connection that truly stands out. Rita's growth from feeling unworthy to realizing she is loved for exactly who she is makes for a deeply empowering narrative. The theme of healing through love, learning to trust again, not just in a partner, but in oneself, speaks to a universal longing for acceptance and emotional security.